Welcome to the Open Loop podcast. It's a podcast exploring the people, companies, and ideas shaping the future of neurotechnology. I'm Chay, the founder of Carter Sciences, Recce Neuro, and the Neurotech newsletter. In each episode, I sit down with founders, operators, researchers, investors, and leaders building the edge of neuroscience, neurotechnology, and healthcare. We'll have honest conversations about people's journeys into the neurotech industry, what they're currently building, how it's going, the realities, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and what the future holds for the neurotech industry in general. Welcome to the latest episode of the Open Loop podcast. I'm joined today by Daniel Månsson, the CSO and co-founder of Flow Neuroscience. Thank you for joining us today, Daniel.
Thank you so much.
We've spoken a couple of times in the past, and obviously there's a lot of exciting stuff happening over at Flow right now, but I always like to start these conversations by understanding someone's journey into founding a neurotech company. There's no real obvious way of doing it. Lots of people come through a neuroscience or biomedical engineering background, but more often than not, there's actually quite a different path. And obviously yours has come through the psychology route. So I'd love to hear your story, your background. I think there was a computer science degree in there somewhere from what I could see on LinkedIn, but would love to know your background and how we got to where we are today.
Yeah, I suppose my background is a little bit unconventional in the sense that I am a clinical psychologist by training. And as you mentioned, I have a computer science degree. I worked in the IT world as a network professional, so putting together large networks and getting different clusters to work together. Also worked a brief period as an architect. It was a startup, you could say, and we did a new building technique, and I was the one designing and coming up with new ideas for smaller houses. So quite diverse background in a sense, but I left that all behind when I took my psychologist degree. So decided to start this company together with Eric, who is a computational neuroscientist, and trying to merge the field of having a good understanding of a patient as a psychologist, and then more on the theoretical neuroscience side from Eric's point of view into creating this treatment.
I mean, how did that introduction with Eric come about? Do you guys know each other for a while, and it's quite a unique blend? Was it a really obvious click and solution to focus on this area, or how did that come about?
Yeah, so we actually met at KTH in Stockholm. So that's a technical university in Sweden, one of the best ones. And I did my, again, quite unconventional training during one of the years where you're supposed to go out and meet patients. I did that in a much more theoretical way. So me and Eric met at the computational lab at KTH. He was working on some machine learning stuff, and I was working on trying to create spiking neural network models for working memory. So we met in theory, you could say, and we had read the same books and had a very intellectual, interesting 6 months together. And then we formed a friendship, and that's now, I think, 12 years ago. And Eric went off to join a startup in San Francisco. I was there visiting him and so on. And then when he came back, I think I originally had the idea that we were going to treat depression. And I had done some work on tDCS before from a research perspective on attentiveness disorders. And we decided that this is the thing that we're going to work on for a long period of time.
Amazing.
So that's how it started.
I love it. So yeah, obviously tDCS has been around for a while. It hasn't really quite cracked the mainstream yet, right? So I suppose from a neurotech perspective, transcranial magnetic stimulation sort of dominated, and it has a lot of criticism in that space because of access to patients and whatnot. And this is obviously slightly different, more portable, take home, obviously can be used in many different settings. I would love to know your thoughts then around, and the emergence of flow neuroscience coming about, the technology, we're using it. Obviously you focus on depression originally. Were there any other thoughts around it to start with? And what did the initial technology and hardware and software, I suppose, look like from your perspective?
So the initial idea was basically the same as it is today. So we had a vision to combine a technology, and we chose tDCS with a behavioral training program in the form of behavioral therapy. And we put that in an app, and we decided that we wanted this holistic approach to depression because we know that many things work, but for different people. So we wanted to create something that were more holistic in its nature. And that idea still lives today. The reason why we chose tDCS 10 years ago or 11 years ago, the field was even more immature than it is today, obviously. And the tDCS was the up and coming technology. We saw when I traveled to the different conferences and actually talked to the professors, it was clear that it had advanced from these mechanistic studies into more behavioral studies of better quality. So the RCTs were just about to come out. Brunoni's study in 2017, for example, was not published when we started, but it was about to be published, and they had the results and so on. We wanted to do something that could get to the patient as quickly as possible. And therefore tDCS was the obvious choice for us. And I still think that was and still is the best alternative, because it takes such a long time to build something. So even if there are emerging technologies today like ultrasound, for example, or tACS, or other types of variants of tDCS, it's still one of the most researched of the technologies that can be used at home. Because the essence of the company, maybe I should talk about that. So the essence of the company is trying to deliver something to the patient that can have a real impact on the big problem of depression. We don't want to build solutions that sits in a clinic or a lab where a few people can access it. We always wanted this to become a first line of treatment for depression. And then we had to prove that it was possible.
It's an interesting point, isn't it? Yeah, because I think accessibility is always the key. And the first point, and as with a lot of technologies in the medical space, the first option is, writing a prescription. That's the pen comes out first before anything else. And often the conversations I have and some of the articles I write are always about at what point does it switch? I think we're at a really interesting precipice now with a lot of treatments in the space, not brain-related, brain health treatments and neurodegenerative in particular, where the efficacy of some of the drugs aren't really living up to the patient's expectations. And it's certainly the case within mental health and depression. So tell me about some of the research that went into the space from you guys at the early stages, or even now, where you've obviously got FDA approval last year, class 3, very, very exciting time for you guys. That was a long journey, I'm sure. It's not easy to get these devices approved by the FDA. There's a lot of research and time and money put into it. Tell me about that process. It's quite an intense one, I imagine.
It is quite intense, and I would say that we were fortunate enough to be based in Europe in the beginning, and we're still based in Europe, but we were fortunate enough to focus on Europe because Europe had a different regulatory system. It's called MDD, as you know, but maybe not the viewers or the listeners. And that meant that you could use science that had been done on the technology tDCS in order to get it approved. I think it was an okay system, but I do understand why they have switched to the MDR, where you actually have to show with your device and with your protocol that this works for the indication that you want to claim something about. But back then you were able to get that approval. And we got that approval, so we didn't have any science to begin with. But then we always had in the plan to build up a competence base in the form of clinical evidence, so that we could do something extra. And that's what we started to do as soon as funding came in. Then, as with all these processes, you start out with a feasibility trial, you see if there's an effect there, or not effect, but you look at if there is any signal, I should say, in the data, and obviously safety and so on. And we did that, and we started to do several of these feasibility trials. On top of that, we collected real-world evidence in order to be able to sense check the open label trials. because they come with certain, almost like biases. You have obviously clinicians connected to these trials, and you never know exactly how they are treating the patient because it's so few numbers. It has a big effect if they come in and they do something special, if there's just 20 people. So we wanted to sense check that with the real world data. And when we were convinced enough to be able to make the bet, we were able to also get the money in order to do the real trial. And the real trial that you alluded to earlier that got us the FDA approval was a big multi-center double-blinded RCT trial that was run in the UK as the primary site and then in Houston in the US. And that was a big bet because we are very scientifically minded, I would say. You never know until you have done it the correct way. So we have strong indications, but then we built the RCT and took a bet on that. And that turned out to be a good bet. I should also add that we refined the protocol during the way. We saw some results coming out. We adapted the protocol with more sessions and a couple of other things in order to get to a successful RCT. And about 2 years ago, we got the results from that trial. It was published in a great journal, Nature Medicine. I think it's a good trial, and the FDA thought that too, and therefore we got the approval in the end.
I think I jumped over the entire European part of the business straight to the FDA approval piece. That was obviously like the exciting news that happened in the last year. But you've had tens of thousands of users in Europe over the years. Is that right?
62,000 users now who have gone through the treatment. Yeah.
Amazing. And is that because I know that obviously you have a presence in the UK as well as Sweden. Where are these patients based geographically?
Primarily in the UK. We have very little presence actually in Sweden.
Yeah.
So we took an early bet on the UK in the very beginning.
Yeah. And I mean, that's a tremendous amount of people, right? To be working with, and a tremendous amount of data. So it must have given you a strong indication, obviously, going into that big trial a couple of years ago as well. Over how long was that 60,000 patient period sort of accumulated? That's a lot of patients.
Yeah, I mean, we got the approval in 2019, but we didn't bet from a commercial point of view until about 3 years ago. So I would say that the big accumulation of those 60,000 happened in the last 2.5 years, something like that.
It's pretty good, England's, well, UK's is pretty small, right? As a Brit that has lived in America for 10 years, I've often talked to people about the European market and vice versa. England's the size of Florida, basically, with a big population, obviously, but land mass. It's pretty a good like microcosm and practice for how you actually get this in front of people. And how was that process for you guys? Because I know there's different accessibilities in the UK with the NHS and then over the counter stuff as well. I mean, what was that process like for you guys?
I think it was a journey. We always had a sense that the clinicians should be using this treatment. They should be using it as a first line of treatment, and we've always argued that. But in order to survive as a company, to not go through these very, very long processes of getting it into the nice guidelines and to get the people within the NHS to pay for it and then start prescribing it, we had to find a way to get the message right to the patient. So we decided early on that, and we also had the approval for it, that we could go directly to the patient. So that's what we did. We're still working hard on the NHS and on the nice guidelines and so on, but it takes a very, very long time in order to get to a level where people can start prescribing it.
Yeah, there is a complicated launch in any country, isn't it? Really, I think the conversations I always have with people about Europe is that most people, if not everyone, is insured, but there are different access points in every single different country, different insurance policies in every different country, and there's more private insurance now in Europe for individuals than there were previously before it was just state-run insurance companies. So yeah, it's equally as complicated to some degree as the US. But in the US being a lot larger and everyone being privately insured, essentially, apart from some of that, the government-run policies is a different policy. I mean, how have you found that since FDA approval, like preparing for the US launch? It's complicated. I mean, I speak to a lot of European businesses about it. How have you guys found it as like a sort of first to market device for the space?
Yes, I mean, we haven't launched yet. We're launching on the 1st of September this year. So let's see about that. But I would actually say the opposite. I mean, it's simple in the sense that the Europeans have a one-payer system, but to navigate that and to create the touch points with the right people, and obviously the evidence, but it's actually the right people to just get processes moving, is much more difficult based on what I now know about the US system and what I now know about the European system, the UK primarily. I would say it's more complicated in the UK. That's my sense. I mean, yeah, I understand, and I always hear that the US is very complex and very different and so on, but it's also more prone to what I would say like commercial risk. I think the risk levels for like the safety for the patient and so on, that's the same all over the place. But in the US, it moves quicker, and more people are ready to have the conversations at fairly high level up in the organization, whether it's a big provider or it's a payer. It could be that we are much more sophisticated now, but I think it's been much more difficult in the UK primarily.
Yeah, I think there's certainly like an adoption to different technologies. But I think more accessibility to it, I think, in the States as well. There seems to be more open-minded just from a general population and patient experience. And maybe it comes down to a disposable income piece as well, which I think is more readily available a lot in the US too. And because of that, we see a lot more open-mindedness to devices. But then again, I think we're also, me and you and everyone else in this like neuro space and mental health space are in a bit of a bubble sometimes too, where we kind of know about all these different technologies. When I speak to a lot of people about, for instance, your device, and they're like, what are you talking about? How would that even be a thing? I mean, I think there's so much in this space to do with explaining to the general public how things actually work and what the benefit is versus what the other alternative options are. Throughout the journey, you must have kind of experienced a few things, obviously across multiple countries in Europe and now speaking to people in the US. What's that sort of translating the science into, layman terms for people been like for you guys? Obviously yourself with a psychology background, Eric from a computational neuroscience background. How's that been just from like I guess a marketing perspective, I suppose?
I think it's been also a journey. In the very beginning, we thought that putting current into the head would be a big thing. People would be scared of that, and it would be difficult to explain that it's not ECT, and because that's a normal association. I think in the UK, with the customers that we at least meet and have an ability to somehow communicate with, that seems to have gone away a little bit. I think the most difficult part has been to explain that this is not just a gimmick or a wellness product, that's something that's very mild. That, I think, has been the difficult part. Is there real science behind this, or are you just a company that is throwing out ads? There are many companies that are claiming all sorts of things, as you know. And I think that's very, very damaging, because how are they supposed to know? The patient who's just seeing it for the first time, is this device or that device and this technology or whatever? So I think that is difficult, and I think that will take care of itself, because clinicians will take a stand and say, okay, this is actually the real thing, but that takes some time. That's been the most difficult part, I would say.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Yeah, there's a conversation that comes up all the time is these wearable wellness devices and stimulation devices, and we're kind of getting into this territory now of like brain reading technology, like signal processing, EEG, machine learning devices, which can now translate stuff. And then it's like, what are you actually doing about that information you're receiving? So that's one thing. That for me is a wellness. There's an Aura ring for the brain, essentially, right? It's a wellness device, which we're going to see pretty more and more and more of. I think when people nail the form factor of a wearable EEG reader, but the stimulation stuff, I mean, neuromodulation, neurostimulation, been around for decades. And just for the normalcy of it for a wearable device, and a non-implantable, which is pretty a lot of people have and don't really talk about that often, but a wearable device you can wear at home is something that's really, really exciting. I mean, yeah, getting the science right is obviously so important. I mean, what is the fundamentals of the science that supports your indications that you're focusing on now? Because right now it's just drug-resistant depression. Is that right? And how does it work from an electrical perspective, I suppose, from a neurotechnology perspective?
Well, the basic explanation is that you apply current, let's say a weak current, 2.0 milliamps, to the left dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, so an area up here somewhere, specifically an area called F3, but there are variants on how you reach that point, so it's not exactly F3, in our case at least. And when you apply that current, you push the neuron towards its firing point. So the technology in itself is not powerful enough to get the neuron to fire like with TMS, which makes it a little bit safer, you could argue. But also you would need other activity in that area in order to actually get it to fire. But adding on that current statistically make the neurons fire more. So you have a short-term effect, which is that they fire more and you get more activity in this area. And then the idea is also that when they fire more, they fire together and then they wire together. So you have an LTP effect, long-term potentiation, which means that you should have an effect longer term also if you stimulate enough. So that's how the basic idea behind it. There are many different other theories about how it actually works, and we're getting better and better at explaining that. But that's what most people believe is happening.
It's interesting, isn't it? We're still working out 100% how it works. We just know it works.
Yeah, and it's the same in all categories, I think. I mean, the antidepressants have for a long period of time claimed that you have a chemical imbalance. It's a very easy to adopt language, right? And now we're finding out that, okay, it's not really like that. And it might work different for different patients and so on. So what we are really interested in is precision psychiatry. This is the first generational product. It's a very good product. It treats what it's supposed to treat, but it doesn't treat everyone. That's the same for all kinds of treatments, obviously. But what if you can get to a state where you can choose the patients that are going to work with this type of treatment and maybe channel them to something else that you know is going to work for them? That, I think, is the next generation, and or I know it is the next generation, and that would be even more exciting and a big move forward for psychiatry, who has been for a long period of time just applying general, whatever it is, pharmaceuticals to people.
Yeah, that's a really good point, isn't it? Like there's lots of different technologies out there. Even within TMS, there's lots of different types of TMS treatments, whether it's length of time or different magnetic coils, and the same thing with electrical or direct current stimulation as well. There's just going to be different types of ampage and so forth that will allow patients to respond in different ways. It's about understanding which patient's going to react, and that's where the research comes into almost, isn't it? It's the how each individual patient is going to react to that. And so we spoke about depression, and I think a lot of wearable neurotech companies right now are looking at expanding indications using the same technology. What's the roadmap look like from that? Is it just focusing on depression right now? Are you looking at other angles? Is there advancements in next gen devices, for instance, or what does the future hold from a technological and indication perspective?
Yeah, so there are a couple of things that I can say and a couple of other things that I can't really talk about publicly yet. But what's registered on clinical trials and so on are a couple of trials where we are involved. And it's one big bipolar trial that we're running based on a feasibility trial that's been published with great results. So I'm talking about the pipeline. I just want to make it clear that this is not an indication for the current device. We're a medical device company. We can only claim things connected to unipolar depression. But what we have in the pipeline is bipolar. We have trials on adolescent depression. We have trials on postpartum depression or perinatal. We have trials on coming up on potentially ADHD. That's a little bit further out. Yeah, that's what I can say right now.
Cool. I like it. A lot of stuff to look forward to that's going to be announced.
Mm-hmm.
No, that's really great. Let's jump into the US launch then. As I recently, I think it was this week, right? Last week of May, you guys announced September 1st as the date that you'll be available in the US. What does that mean exactly for patients and whatnot who want access to this?
Yeah, so I think we will come back to exactly how patients are going to access it and so on, because that will be an announcement in itself with the clear, this is the site, this is the providers that are going to provide it, and whether it's reimbursed or not, and so on and so forth. But in general, it means that the device will be accessible and shipped from September 1st.
There's lots of changes in the way the US manufacturing laws and import exports are done, obviously, over the last couple of years.
Yes.
How are you guys viewing those challenges as a European business launching in the US?
I don't think that has been a big problem. There are many things that needs to be handled, but this one is, I wouldn't say it's trivial, but it's manageable. So I mean, we've been manufacturing for a long period of time and providing devices for various countries. Australia, we have an approval in Australia. We have shipped to Brazil in the past, all of Europe, even Hong Kong, Switzerland, and so on. So it's yeah, not trivial, but it's definitely manageable.
Yeah, I'm sure things sort of like make sense as well as you grow and expand, and I'm sure that the numbers will kind of help define what that looks like. I mean,
Yeah.
talk us through this September 1st launch then. What does that look like for the business? You mentioned obviously you're a European business at the beginning. You said not quite a US business yet. I imagine there's going to be some big growth plans. I know that a lot of people listening will be excited to hear, growth plans. What are the opportunities going to be like for people who are really not just accessible for the device, but people who are interested in working at Flow as well?
Yeah. So I would say that we obviously the US for many pharmaceutical and medtech companies is the big market, and with the FDA approval, first in class, with this quite unique, I would say, indication, also moderate to severe non-treatment refractory patients, is a enormous group of people. We can deliver the treatment as a monotherapy, as a standalone treatment, or as an adjunctive to an antidepressant, which is also a very, very wide indication. And we have the data to back that up, obviously. The focus going forward is the US. We will still be in Europe. We will still have a great business in Europe. We have the whole team there, fantastic, amazing team that you have helped to build also. Yeah, so the European business, strong, growing, and so on. But the US will be a new market with a very strong focus for us. So the team, which we have no one in the US right now, but the team will grow there substantially in the coming, let's say, 12 months.
There's lots of different angles as well on there of how people are going to grow. I think one of the things that we spoke about last time was there's this idea of what a traditional medical device company should look like versus, what the future looks like. The world is changing dramatically, right? Accessibility to devices. This is its first of its kind, a wearable, a take-home device. You can order it online or get it sent to your house, for instance, maybe on prescription. But it's exciting. It's new. It's completely different.
Yes.
The vision of how to build a medical device company pretty doesn't really apply to this directly. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, I'm sure you get told all the time that this is how you build a medical device company, and there's lots of opinions. I mean, what are your opinions on that? Not to
Yeah, the playbook have been explained to me many times by different people, and I understand. There has been a way to do it in the past, and this is slightly different. We're not reinventing the wheel in any way, but it is slightly different. So we're looking all over the place. The GLP-1s come up, and the winners in that space in Eli Lilly have done it a little bit differently. They have, I would say, built it a little bit from the bottoms up. Maybe not in the very beginning, but they switched a little bit strategy in the middle, and it looks like it's a winning strategy to lower the barrier to access for the patient. With that said, you have to be very careful not to make it seem like you're circumventing the doctors. We don't want to circumvent the doctors. The doctors should be there. They should treat the patient. It has to do with a very serious disease. We know that. We know that intimately. So we want to balance that and make sure that the patient can access it, but in a safe way. So I would say that it's a mix of the playbook and the new ways of accessing the treatments for the patients.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. It's such a huge patient population. You want to lower the barriers. You don't want to sort of even disrespect the complexity of the FDA approval process either, as well as like the doctors too. But it does need to be accessible to people, and there's a ton of things that are accessible like online these days, but there is still a medical process that goes into you getting access to it. It's not just readily available to everybody.
And we have seen examples in the past, actually, in the neuro space, where you basically click a couple of buttons, 2 or 3, and then you get the prescription. And I think the reason why the FDA hasn't struck down on that is because these company hasn't been that successful. But I'm sure that if a company becomes successful and that's the way they do it, I think that would be a problem. So you have to be serious about patient safety, and you have to be serious about the prescriber. That's what I can say.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting when it's readily accessible. I say readily accessible, obviously through a medical process. But yeah, people at home receiving these devices, putting on an electrical stimulator on your head yourself, it's going to be interesting. Is that the plan, or would it be you would need to be the first time you use it, for instance, need to be with a trained professional, for instance, or is it not that complicated to use for an individual?
We have a lot of data from Europe suggesting that you don't have to be led through the process. The device and the app has been designed specifically for the patient to be able to use it themselves. But the process leading up to a prescription is what I'm mostly talking about. So the use of the device in itself is not complicated. It's built for home use, easy access, and very simple procedure. But the prescription process is a different story.
Yeah, that's exciting. There's a lot to kind of see how this unfolds, and I'm really excited to see the September 1st launch date. Congratulations! I mean, I know it's been a journey so far to get here, and I know you're just getting started now. But
we are
it's been
just
great to follow you
started,
guys.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
This podcast is brought to you by Carter Sciences, the headhunting practice that covers not only headhunting, but also fractional talent work for startups who need help, but don't want to spend those big recruitment fees, wanting to work on a more hourly basis with companies, and also career coaching for neurotech professionals. The goal is to provide cost-effective solutions across all neurotech hiring needs.